Hi, I'm Dave.
Hi, I'm Michael.
And this is D&M.
Okay, Dave, here we are, mate. It's D&M, and we're going to be today talking about the music that changed us, or the music that made us.
The music that influenced us.
Yeah.
The music that moved us.
And we both love music. I think it's a thing, everyone's got the songs and the albums that had an impact on them. Do you have memories of being around music as a kid?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember at my grandmother's house, they had a 78 record player.
Yeah.
Old needle, had to be on 78. And I used to listen over and over to the only album they had that was 78. No, they had a few actually, but the only song I liked being played was Gene Autry's Ghost Riders in the Sky.
Yeah, yeah.
And as a little kid, I used to listen to that. Dark horses came out riding on a dark and windy day.
Yeah.
Used to scare me.
Yeah.
And I picture these ghost riders in the sky. Like,
that song sounded epic as a kid. It sounded big.
Yeah.
You hear it now, and it doesn't have the same thing. But I remember as a kid that sounded ethereal.
Yeah.
And like Riders on the Storm had a presence too for me, that sonically it felt big. Anyway, sorry to cut you off.
No. I think there's some reference to somewhere with Riders on the Storm and Ghost Riders.
Okay.
There's some similar thing to that I've read. But that was early on. And then, of course, one of my earliest memories, so I was not even in kindy yet.
Yeah.
We're looking now at about 67,
Yeah.
maybe 68. I started kindy in 69. And because the girls weren't at home. I remember watching my sisters leave for school and then being in the backyard with mum. I specifically remember this. She had the radio on all the time. She was hanging clothes on the clothesline, and it was a semi-cloudy day. So the clouds were blowing fast up in the sky, and it would go very dark, very quick, and the sun had come out. I remember all of this.
Yeah, yeah.
And when it would go dark, I'd go, it's night time. And then the cloud would move away and the sun would come out, go daytime. And I was listening to the radio, and I'll tell you the song in a minute. The guy on the radio, the DJ at the time, said, this is the number one song at the moment. I remember saying to Mum, what does that mean, number one song?
Yeah.
And she said, well, everybody's buying that record. It's the most popular favourite record at the moment. Okay, I get it. And it was, kiss me and smile for me, tell me that the Seekers, I think.
Not the carnival is over.
Like you'll never let me go leaving on a jet plane.
Oh, leaving on a jet plane.
Yeah. I remember listening to that, and I really listened to it, going, why?
Yeah.
Why is this number one? But I really remember that. It was Vietnam was happening and all of this, I guess. But Mum was the musical one. Dad, not so much.
So she bought music and had music.
She would go
house.
and buy Bowie's latest record.
Wow.
Sorrow, and as soon as it came out, she'd go and get it.
Yeah.
She'd go and buy records and play them, and Beatles and Rolling Stones. We had all of that in the house.
She was hip.
Yeah, she was very, very hip for a day. So she was the musical influence on me. Yeah. What about yourself?
I grew up remembering the first bit of vinyl I ever saw was Dad was the vinyl guy because he played guitar, and he had a copy of the Shadows' greatest hits. And so it's, if you know your vinyl, it's a classic album cover. It's got the three guitars as shadows on a wall, and I remember that captivated me. And Apache was one of the first songs I remember hearing, just an instrumental piece that Dad would play as well. And that was the first sort of introduction to music, was that album by the Shadows, and then also Buddy Holly's greatest hits. So those, I can still see the cover art as a kid. But every weekend there'd be music on in the house. So I was just fascinated by vinyl. But it was Buddy Holly and the Shadows. As a kid, I remember just hearing those songs a lot and then hearing Dad play. And as I got older, as we'll talk, music became, it's like a universe. There's this universe of sound, and then it branches off. And you can hear, Elvis influences this act and creates this sound, and he's influenced by this sound, and it all branches off, and it has these wonderful streams. So it's like you can lose yourself in this universe of music, as we know. And from there, it was only a few steps away from discovering the Beatles, and that was the 1962 to 66 double red album from the 70s, which for a lot of people was their gateway drug to the Beatles. It's the iconic double album, where they're on the EMI steps in 63, really young, looking down, and then on the back they're looking down in 1969, 68, much older. That album just blew my mind, and from there I never looked back. But those were the earliest memories of music, and then it's been a journey ever since. Can you remember the very first album you bought? when you actually physically went out and bought your own vinyl?
My first album, that's a really good... The one that I used to flog a lot, I believe it was my sister's. I think I stole it off her. The first album I would have bought probably would have been... We didn't buy many because back in the day, you'd find a mate who had the album and you'd record it onto cassette.
Yeah.
The first album for me that I flogged and it moved me, and I'm a young teenager, I'm 12, 13 years of age, was Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare.
Yeah, right.
That was the one, because I would listen to that again, very similar to how I listened to Ghost Riders in the Sky.
Yeah.
It had these stories,
Yeah.
and it's epic and it's operatic.
Yeah.
I didn't know this at the time, but these are the hooks that got me in. What do you call it? The orchestral stuff in the background. It was just different, different to other stuff being played on the radio. It wasn't even played on the radio, and that was the appeal for me as well. So that was the first one. Probably the first album I bought would have been Midnight Oil's Head Injuries.
Yeah.
And that was a lot later on, because as I say, you found someone who had the album and you'd go and tape it.
Why don't we jump in and let's break it down, because in this episode we're going to talk through the albums or the songs that made us. Mm-hmm. Everyone's got a soundtrack to their lives, and we're just sharing our soundtrack today. And in 5 or 6, probably no more than 7, we'll see how we go, but we're going to share the music that made us and why. And then for maybe people that are listening, you might want to go back and have a listen. You might get inspired to have a listen, which is what it's about, right? If you had to kick off, what's the first song, first album that made you?
Yeah, well, that one.
It is that. It's Head Injuries.
No. It is Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare.
Okay. Let's put that in its time too, because we're talking, mid-70s, and that was a tour that it was full of vaudeville and theatre.
Incredible.
And so it was a whole package, wasn't it? And that just exploded.
Well, he toured in 1977, the Welcome to My Nightmare tour. And if anybody wants to look it up on YouTube and the whole concert is there.
It's there, isn't it?
And you will sit back going, my God. Now, for a 13-year-old kid to go and see that at the Sydney Showground as my first ever rock concert, it was, if you're into Tenacious D, if you're into The Pick of Destiny, you watch this and go, okay, righto.
That's where the roots are.
It's really the roots of all of this with the Bowies and that. But Alice Cooper, the performance he put on the stage, the costuming, the characters.
Was that your first live gig?
That was my first live gig.
Yeah, what a way to go.
Yeah, wow. And it was only through one of my sisters being sick that my mother said, well, he's been playing the album more than you, and said to my big sister, you take him. And she was not happy that she had to take her 13-year-old brother. She had friends all there. And I was genuinely gobsmacked at what was going on and fell in love with the music even more.
Yeah.
Because it told a story.
Standout track? Standout piece from that album? Or?
Yeah, there's a song called Years Ago.
Yeah.
And it's about, he's a little boy and he's lost in a theme park.
Yeah.
And he's by himself on a carousel. The music's... It's and he sings, here I go again, up and down alone, all my friends went home years ago. And I'm getting little goosies now.
Yeah.
But I used to sit and listen to it, and you could hear people in the background. Well, who are those people? He's in the theme park by himself, but you can hear voices from somewhere else. And his mother starts to call him, and it's just haunting. Absolutely a haunting track.
It's interesting because I think the album, some would argue, is largely dead. But back then in that period, it was all about the album. And you would sit there and go through the journey of the art from side 1, flip it over to side 2. Yeah. And now it's more disposable and it's more immediate, and you're just jumping into tracks. But back then, those albums, particularly that piece of work, is a beginning to end kind of story. And it really was groundbreaking. If you had to say that the album that firstly had the most impact, it's Welcome to My Nightmare by Alice Cooper.
Yeah, absolutely. Yourself, I'd ask the same question. First impact.
The big one was, it's funny, it's a really obscure and hard to find Australian compilation album called The Essential Beatles, which my folks bought for me, I think about 78. And it has a really odd mix of tracks. And for years I never understood why it was these tracks. So you'll jump from something out of 1963 to something from 67 off Mystery Tour. So you'll go from Honey Don't, which is a Ringo vocal, into Baby You're a Rich Man, which is a psychedelic piece out. And I remember as a kid, it never really connected to me. I wanted it to, because I remember getting into that band. But it was an odd track listing. As I got older and became a collector, I got to understand that these were all tracks that had been big sellers in Australia as singles, and it was a uniquely Australian compilation. Oh. So it's a bit of a patchwork quilt. It jumps around all over the place. But it was the first Beatles album, and I remember just sort of owning that, and then jumping across to 1962 to 1966, the Double Red album, which was just like a mind blower. Yeah. You know, it starts with Please Please Me and goes right through, and that album was just having it in your hands, looking at those faces, and that was the great thing about having albums. You could hold it, you could read the lyrics, and
open it up.
Yeah, open it up, and you could lose yourself.
Artwork,
We're so overwhelmed with noise now, and it's hard to kind of just sit in the art. That is coming back. Vinyl's coming back, but yeah, essential Beatles and Beatles 62 to 66.
A standout track that hooked you?
I can still remember as a kid, maybe being 7 or 8 years old, having breakfast at my nan's house, and I can still remember the very first time I heard the Beatles, and it was Please Please Me, and it was coming through this crackly little transistor radio in the kitchen. The first time I'd heard that song, and I remember just eating my breakfast and, oh, listen to that, what's that? Nothing else sounded like that to my ears. And that was the beginning of just planting that seed. I was asking, who's this? And mum and dad would particularly talk about, oh, that's the Beatles. And I remember him telling me a story as a kid when he was dating mum in 1966 in Melbourne. And he said, you have to understand at the time how big this music was. He said, I remember walking to pick up your mum to go for lunch in a retail store where she was working. And the radio was playing and people were shopping and looking at clothes. It's like a clothing store. And the radio announcer said, oh, and coming up now, we've got the newest single from the Beatles. It's just been released today. And it was Day Tripper. And Dad said, I kid you not, the whole shop stopped moving. People stopped and just cocked their heads up to the sound, and of all ages, because it was news. And those opening licks from Day Tripper got played. And Dad said, I can still remember the first time I heard Day Tripper, because it stopped people in a shop to go, oh, listen to that. Wow, listen to that. That's when that art was really special in a world that was much simpler. You know. But that was the beginning. But
good.
If you move ahead, because you grew up in Sydney.
Yep. Really
big live music scene was happening. Oh. You know, when you were growing up, you had things like the Oils were exploding.
This was the late 70s through the 80s, and it was pre the era when hotels were allowed to have poker machines.
Yeah.
Poker machines were only allowed in registered clubs, so the pubs had nothing. They had to get they had to get people in, and they got it in, especially back then, by having live bands.
Yeah.
Now, having live bands like that created your garage. It was huge at the time.
Yeah.
And on any given weekend, with a bus trip could get you to go and see Midnight Oil. I remember the first time we saw In Excess, we didn't even know who they were. The Vinyls.
Spy versus
Angel, Spy versus Spy.
Radiators.
Crawl, Mental as Anything, Radiators.
Yeah.
It was non-stop.
Sunny
Men
Boys.
at Work.
Yeah.
Non-stop you went to see a band. Yeah. So a lot of times it was like $2, $1 to get in. And it was just a golden era for Australian music. I don't think there'll ever be anything like it again. But the amount of music from Australian rock bands that come out during that time was incredible. Yeah.
There's a photo of you at an Oils gig as a teenager that's been plastered around inside books from the period, isn't there?
Yeah, that was a live concert at Wanda Beach for Double J. I don't think it was Triple J. I think it was Double J still. But there was the Table Waiters came on first. We didn't know them. Then there was Machinations, then My Sex, then In Excess, and then Midnight Oil. This was a free concert on the beach at Wanda.
Yeah.
And it was raining, but we were right down the front. And there's a photo of me. There's a photo of Peter Garrett on stage, and you can spot me in the background quite easy.
Yeah.
But that was just an incredible day because we left there and went back to Maroubra and then went and saw the Radiators, someone else on the Radiators that night. So my ears the next day were gone.
Yeah.
But what a day for just seeing that much music in
such
one
a different
day.
world, isn't it? I remember the very first gig I ever saw was the Divinals with Chrissy Amphlett obviously up front, opening for Split Ends, and it was the ends of the Ends with a Bang tour, so it was their final tour.
Yeah.
So the first concert was the final performance on the tour of Split Ends as a kid, and again, those gigs were rolling into town every week.
Yeah.
You could go and see all these great acts. Let's just jump in. We'll go through our top 5 real quick.
Yep.
If you had to call, let's just maybe say what would be number 5, number 6 on your list. We don't have to be stuck in the concrete on
For
a number.
albums?
Yeah, let's just say albums, because I've made a little bit of a list.
Yeah.
I haven't seen yours. You haven't seen mine.
No.
What would you start with, and we'll work down to number 1s.
Okay. Well. Okay. I'm going through it as in no particular order.
We can do that.
I'm going through mine with historical
Done.
order.
Let's do it.
So I've got the next one is Never Mind the Bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols.
Right.
Now, being 15, 16 years of age, my sister's heavily into disco, and really on the radio everything was disco. There were a bunch of us that needed something different, and it came. I remember seeing on, I think it was Mike Willesee, on then a Current Affair one night, it might have been Mike Willesee, saying there's a new musical revolution sweeping England, largely being led by a band called the Sex Pistols. Now, straight up I went, what? The what?
That's right.
And of course they showed Anarchy in the UK starting up and God Save the Queen, the film clips. And my father was sitting there going, for God's sakes, who'd buy that? And I'm sitting there thinking, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, I went and got that album pretty well as soon as it came out and went down the whole Pistols and punk path. It was fantastic.
That scene blew it all open, didn't it?
Oh, it was, bang.
Yeah, it's funny.
There was new music.
Yeah, there you go.
Something else.
It's one of those.
It was an option.
I've never jumped on that train, and I know you've told me in the past you've got to go back and you've got to listen to it. I still listen to interviews with modern artists, or I guess kind of legacy artists, whether it's a Dave Grohl or whoever it might be, who will talk about that album and its impact or the Clash, and I can't get my ears in it. It's just one of those things
that surprises me.
Yeah, I don't know.
It really does.
There is an energy there I can appreciate.
London Calling, which isn't on my list, and I'm steering off a bit now.
Yeah.
But that album is an album that I can play whenever I've just got nothing to do.
Yeah. Because
the amount of different styles of music.
Yes.
There's reggae, there's a bit of this, there's a bit of that. There is some punk. It's just got so many cool tracks.
Yeah.
And I've often said to you, got to give it a go.
Yeah, got to dive in, which is part of the reason for talking about this stuff today. I'll tell you, an album that blew the back of my head off was Grace by Jeff Buckley.
Yeah.
My brother, who, as you know, plays guitar and was heavily into his music, I remember he rang me and he said, have you heard Grace by Jeff Buckley? And I said, no, and we were both living far apart from each other. And I said, no, I haven't heard of it. What is it? He said, don't even ask, go buy it. And I remember him saying to me, it's like this guy came from outer space. He doesn't sound like anyone else. The way he plays guitar, it's like he's from somewhere else. And I'm laughing. He goes, no, passionate, go get that album. So I went and grabbed it. And as it turned out, he was touring at the same time. And he was playing in Tweed Heads. And I thought, well, I'll go and see this guy. And it's one of my great regrets. I walked out of that gig 2 songs in to even think that I'd walk out of that a Jeff Buckley gig, because I'd never walk out of gigs. But the place was packed. He came out, back to the audience, and they jammed for maybe 10, 15 minutes. No vocals and no eye contact, just back to the audience jamming. And I remember watching and thinking, what am I looking at? I don't understand what this is. He's not even playing to us. I kicked myself because I walked out. I remember, I'm not hanging around for this.
Wow.
I left it.
Okay. Yeah.
Then I got into the album.
Yeah.
And fell in love with it. And became one of my favourite albums of all time. And true to what my brother was saying, no one sings like that or sounds like that. To this day, I think Bono said it best when Jeff Buckley passed. Jeff Buckley was a pure drop in an ocean of noise.
Okay.
That was how Bono described it. I fell in love with that album, couldn't stop playing it. And then I realised I didn't know what I didn't know. I walked out on this guy. Not long after I really fell in love with that album, he drowned.
Yeah.
And he was gone. Yeah. And it became one of my great regrets of walking out of that gig, when to this day there is still no one that sounds like Jeff Buckley. And that album stands up.
Absolutely.
The track for me on there is not so much Hallelujah, which he made his own and the rest is history, but is a track called So Real.
Yep.
And just the chords that are in that song, the chord structure, the melody, lyrically, and what he does with his voice. I mean, if anyone hasn't already taken the journey into that album, that's the one I would straight away say is a mind blower.
Yeah.
But sit, relax, light a candle and have a listen to So Real. And then find me anything else that sounds like that, because nothing else sounds like that.
Yeah.
So Jeff Buckley's Grace.
Interestingly about that album is I was probably year 2000 working, going around my workplace, doing what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Fronting people straight away and doing the old greatest album of all time, quick, off the top of your head.
Yeah, right.
And a lot of the younger blokes, I remember the first guy that said it, Grace, Jeff Buckley. I went, what? Okay. Huh? And then the amount of times later on, the next day, a week later, another young bloke, Grace. What? So-and-so said that. Yeah. The amount of guys that were starting to say it made me go and buy it without listening to it. Okay, I'll go and buy it. Something's going on here.
Did it have to grow on you, or did you...
Nah, first listen. Yeah. I remember when he died, I remember hearing it on the radio. I knew of Last Goodbye, that was being played anyway. And they played that after they made the announcement that he'd passed. And I remember driving, I even remember exactly where I was when I was driving that day. And I thought, oh wow, that's pretty sad. And I talked about it a bit, but it wasn't until just fronting people up a few years later and getting the bang, 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 different younger guys giving me the exact same answer that really surprised me.
So that's one for me. What have you got? What's on your list? Hit me.
Okay, next up, what have I got? Next up, I've got my little list here.
Yeah.
I haven't got that many, you think I'd be able to remember, but yeah, and I it's Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah, right.
Pink Floyd. You and I have had a discussion about this before. Yeah. That album was introduced to me by an ex-girlfriend years after, obviously, it had come out.
That's what I was going to ask you. Did you jump on that train when it came?
No, I knew of it because of my sisters. Yeah. I don't even know if they had it.
So you came late to it?
Yeah, came late to it. You know, there was a lot of Zepp being played and stuff like that. This was the 70s, but it wasn't, I didn't discover it until it was 1982.
Right.
And I was with had a girl in my life. She was a bit older than me. This was well before Toy Boys and Cougars and things, but I was the younger man in the relationship. And she said to me, you have to listen to this. This album's great for cuddling with, as want of a better word. And I went, okay. And she put it on and we cuddled and it was good. But bang, I now then went out and got the album. And that album still to this day is an album if I put headphones on, grab a coffee or grab a beer, or if it's a rainy day, sit back, close your eyes. From start to finish, you are taken on a journey, and that journey is somewhere out there. I'm not going to say into space, or it's another dimension. Yeah, it is great and just pure brilliance.
Yeah, it took me a long time to come to the Floyd. I remember, and again, it was my brother. He's always sort of been on the sidelines. I remember him saying the same to me about Lenny Kravitz's first album, Let Love Rule, which is a terrific album. I think Lenny plays everything on it, and there's some cracking tracks on that. But he also said, "Give Pink Floyd a chance," you know. And I went to Dark Side of the Moon early 2000s, because I'd kind of heard so much that I thought I won't live up to the hype. For me, I've heard too much, but I did. I dived into it, and I did fall in love with it. For me, I think is it Animals. It might be even a stronger album for me. But,
wow, yeah.
You know, but but it's a master.
Animals is the one's got 4 tracks.
Yes. Yeah. And then again, that's my brother putting me onto that. But yeah, the Floyd is a whole universe in itself, isn't it? But Dark Side of the Moon. It's I first thought it's an acquired taste, but there's sonically so much adventure in that. And then I think it, as you say, it's got to be a headphones album. Oh, yeah. I'll jump in here and let you know another from me on my list. Jubilee by Grant Lee Buffalo. It's a little known album for a lot of people, but Grant Lee Buffalo essentially is singer-songwriter Grant Lee Phillips. And Jubilee, for me, from the first track through to the end, is a near perfect album if no one's had the opportunity to listen to his music. If I was to go back in time to the track that introduced me to him, comes off an album called Mighty Joe Moon. That's a track called Mockingbirds. And have a listen to these lyrics. This guy almost writes novels in verses, but these are the lyrics pulled out of Mockingbirds, which comes off the album Mighty Joe Moon. Devastation at last, finally we meet, after all of these years out here on the street. I had a feeling you would make yourself known. You came along just to claim your place on the throne, and I have been overthrown.
Wow.
I mean, and he takes those lyrics and puts them in a falsetto delivery against these beautiful chords. I can still remember hearing those lyrics as a young guy going, whoa, what? Devastation at last, finally we meet. Just in 2 lines, I'm in.
Yeah.
Where are we going here?
Yeah.
But Grant Lee Phillips is the guy behind those lyrics, and he's a lyrical master. Many albums, he's now recording under his actual name, but Grant Lee Buffalo was what he was recording when he put together that particular piece. But the album Jubilee is a real achievement. That was one that I'll go back to consistently over the years. So Grant Lee Buffalo for me.
Okay.
What you got?
I'm jumping ahead in time now, and again, it's a period of change. Music was very similar. I'm now at the end of the 90s.
Yep.
We had a lot of, in the 90s, we had a lot of...
flannel.
End of the 80s. Sorry. The end of the 80s.
Right.
We had a lot of...
pastels.
high hair,
Yeah.
a lot of, and really the rock started going down, your silly bands. I'm trying to think of their names. They're just terrible. Just hair bands.
There was a lot of hair and not a lot of soul.
So I was waiting for I think we were all waiting for something else.
Yeah.
And the years ended 1990, started 1991, and I've got a tie with 2 albums.
Right.
From Bang,
The
that
same
period
year?
of my life. Yeah, I think they both come out in 91.
Okay.
Blood Sugar Sex Magic.
Well, yeah.
And I'll tell you why about that in a second.
Yeah.
And 10 Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
10 Pearl Jam has grown on me more and more over the years. I won't go back as much and play Blood Sugar.
Really?
No,
I go back to that album a lot.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. And it is still above 10, but it's easier for me to listen to 10
It's
now.
not trying to do the same thing that 10's trying to do either.
No, completely different things.
Yeah.
The Red Hot Chili Peppers, for me, are my favourite band of all time.
Yeah.
Now, this was at a period when there was a certain look, a certain style, you had Warrant and all of this.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing Under the Bridge. I remember hearing them earlier, actually. I saw them, they were background of a movie called Tough Guys. It was with Burt Lancaster and, I can't think of his name now, Kirk Douglas.
Yeah.
2 old guys got out of prison, trying to live, can't, so they decide to rob a train again.
Yeah.
It's an 80s movie. And they go along one night and this band's in the background playing. It was the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah, right.
Then I heard them do the Stevie Wonder.
Higher Ground.
Yeah, 89.
Freaky Styley, I think, was the album.
Yeah, 89. I saw
could
that
be
on
wrong.
Rage of a night,
Right.
late Rage. I thought, okay, all right.
Yeah.
But Under the Bridge. And I went, okay, this is different.
Yeah.
That's a very different sound. I remember saying at work one day, is it a remake? I feel like I've heard it before. Is this a remake of something?
It's a very, for me, it was a very Hendrix lick. That opening guitar for me always sounded like a little bit Burning of the Midnight Lamp or a little bit Jimi Hendrix Experience. I later got to know Frusciante adores him.
Yeah.
But sorry to cut your flow.
No, and you're spot on with that too.
Yeah.
But it was, do I know this?
Yeah.
I felt like I recognised
It's familiar.
It touched me straight away.
Yeah.
Didn't go and buy the album. I remember being in a nightclub probably, I don't know, months later, and in the nightclub everyone was drinking, and the film clip for
Give It Away?
Give It Away.
I knew before you even said it.
The whole club stopped.
Right.
No one was dancing.
Yeah.
You look at that film clip and you think, what in the world is going
They're
on
painted
here?
silver with
Painted
horns.
silver, and I've seen an interview with the French director, and he said, Anthony, when I said, okay, action on the first take, he gave me so much energy. And I thought, wow, you're going to this level straight away? Yeah. I'm not going to have to give him no direction. I just filmed it. And we stood there going, what on earth is this? And that was the next day. Went and got the album. Yeah. And it is a masterpiece. Each track leads into the next track, and it's got funk. Yeah. And the rhythm is just brilliant.
It's relentless.
Yeah, it is brilliant.
You know who I think a star of that album is Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
The production on that album is so perfectly complementary to what that band's trying to do. It's thick, it's rich, but every instrument breathes in the mix. There's not I'll still play that in the car and give it volume, and you can hear how beautifully produced that band is. Yeah. That album doesn't sound like anything else. And it holds up. You could play that today and it sounds as fresh as it did all those years ago. It is a real achievement.
Recorded in an empty Hollywood mansion in the Hollywood Hills.
Believed to be haunted.
Yeah, it was haunted.
Yeah.
They believe there was someone upstairs.
Yeah. You can watch the making in Funky Monks.
Funky Monks, yeah.
There's that I think Hendrix may have even recorded in there.
Okay.
I think there's stories about Hendrix recording in there as well. But if you're just a fan of music production, that album is a big achievement from Rick Rubin, who went on to do other things with Tom Petty, made Petty's Wildflowers sound amazing too.
If you are listening to this and think, okay, that sounds very good, I'll go and give it a go, probably don't get a cup of tea, be prepared. Some of the tracks are very in your face. It's not easy listening. So don't think it's all based on Under the Bridge, which is beautiful. But if you just think, I'm going to listen to pure funk, that's it.
I'll tell you, the standout track on that album for me is I Could Have Lied.
Oh, I know who it's written about. You would too.
No?
That's
I remember
it's in his book.
Could have lied, I was such a fool, my eyes could never ever keep their cool. Told her and I showed her how she struck me.
But I
yes
messed up.
So who's he talking about?
Sinead O'Connor.
Really?
Yeah, he wrote it for Sinead
Didn't know
O'Connor
that.
and then went to play it for her. And I think he said in his book he gave her the cassette. Still to this day doesn't know if she listened to it.
Oh, wow.
But he was obsessed with it for
I
a
didn't
while.
know
There.
that.
Yeah. So that's a good story there.
I know we've told this story. I bumped into Anthony Kiedis in New York City. I was over there on a business trip, and I walked out of a show on Broadway and crossed the street, and the cab rank, there he was. It was around the time of By the Way album. Okay. He had that haircut. And I walked up, you know the story, right? I just said, hey, Mr. Kiedis, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm a big fan from Australia. I just want to say hi. And he looked at me chewing gum and just nodded his head. And we looked at each other in a moment of silence. I nodded my head and, okay, I'll leave you be. Thank you. I walked away. He just nodded, went back to waiting for his cab. Didn't say a word, but nodded his head like, thank you. But it made it very clear, in a very New York way,
back off.
We're not going to be talking. We're not going to be talking. The moment's done. A buddy of mine, I know we were jumping around, but a buddy of mine that I used to work with years ago was a big music fan, big Led Zeppelin fan. He's having beers in Byron Bay at the hotel. Is it the Northern? The hotel up by the coastline?
Yeah.
He's having beers. He's been drinking beers all afternoon with his friend. It's a Sunday afternoon. Blues Fest was on at the time, or coming up. While he's having his beers, this couple walk past an open window, and it's Robert Plant and his wife. And he does a double take and looks at his buddy and says, hey, that Robert Plant just walked past. The guy's like, nah. He goes, I'm telling you, it was Robert Plant. I've got to go and say something. He's like, really? He's sure? Yeah. So he runs out and calls after him, and Robert said, he's got some bags and been shopping or whatever. Mr. Plant. And he turns around and he's like, yes. And he says, I just wanted to say it's a pleasure. And he's had a few drinks, right? I just wanted to say it's an honour to meet you. And he put his hand out. Robert shook his hand. And then away he goes. Well, it's good to meet you too, buddy. Shakes his hand. And then Robert turns to go, but he starts up. I got to tell you, when I heard Led Zeppelin 2, that just blew my mind. I got my favourite track on that album. It's probably on side 2. When I first heard, and as he's rambling, Robert just leans in politely and quietly and says to him, hey, listen, mate, don't spoil this. And he, what? He said, don't spoil this. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and he said, I went quiet and just nodded. Robert turned and walked away and kept walking and handled him in a real Zen-like manner.
Wow.
Just said to him, don't spoil it. Before you even go any further, don't start telling me your favourite album. Not that he said this, but he's essentially saying, Don't start telling me your favourite albums. Don't start telling me what the music meant to you. I've heard it all before. I appreciate it. You're going to spoil this. I shook your hand.
Yeah.
Please walk away.
Great.
And he was.
Summed it up
He said he handled me so well. He said, "Oh wow, I just went quiet."
Yeah.
But sometimes they say don't meet your idols. You might be disappointed. And other times, it might work out okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that there was that one, and then the other one for that period was 10. And when Alive came out, I thought, here we go. Nevermind was around as well. I think Alive came out the week before Nevermind.
What a time for music!
What a time. But okay, here it was again, almost like punk rock's back, and they called it grunge, but it was just good rock and roll. And I went, okay, great. And so I went down both paths, Nirvana and Pearl Jam. I've seen both play. But
what was it about Pearl Jam? Lyrics, sound?
Again, I think
all of it.
Jeff Ament with the bass.
Yeah.
I know they've had a different lot of drummers over the time, but again, it's the rhythm, and it's just got this deep rhythm to it. On top of the licks, and the guitars are great, and Vedder's vocals are great, and the lyrics are incredible. My number one song on that album is Black.
Yeah.
Such a tragic love story with the lyric. I know someday you'll have a beautiful life. I know you'll be a star in somebody else's sky, but why can't it be mine?
Yeah.
Now, he wrote that for his first girlfriend.
Right.
He's actually crying in that, recording that song.
Come on.
You listen to that song and you hear the
Do you know
the
that for a fact?
Yeah, that's the fact. You'll hear some of the wails.
Really?
The unintelligible
Yeah,
moans
he's
doing.
riffing
He
in the
is
moment. Yeah.
losing it. And he still says to this day, whenever I sing that song, I still think of her. He's married. He's been with other women. He's married with kids. He's happy. But every time he sings that song, that's for her.
Yeah.
I still think of her every day. And I think how much that girl touched him to write that. And she probably is a star in someone else's sky. Probably herself maybe regrets why I'm with Eddie Vedder. I don't know.
Great lyricist. And that song is an amazing track.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, to this day, it's aged beautifully. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. The White Album, The Beatles, 1968. It's sprawling double album. It's romantic. It's dark. It's spiritual. It's got a bit of ska in there with Obla Dee Bla Da. You get Helter Skelter, which is like the prototype for heavy metal, where nothing else sounded like Helter Skelter in 1968. You've got to remember, in 1967, these guys had just done Sgt. Pepper, and it's all psychedelic, and it's colour, and it changes the world. Sgt. Pepper changes cultures and raises the bar for studio production. So they do that. How do you follow Sgt. Pepper? Well, they come back the very next year. They follow it up with a double album, and the cover is blank. Like, this is what's amazing about these guys. The whole world's waiting. What are they going to do next? They're actually going to give you a 30-plus track album, double, which they've never done, because surely they've got nothing left in the tank.
And the artwork is completely opposite to the last one.
Because there's nothing on it. And it's going to be called The White Album. That album is something I go back to again and again. It's just so rich and diverse. Then they do Revolution number 9 on there, which is just pure avant-garde soundscaping. You've got the biggest band in the world doing conceptual, abstract musical art when no one else is doing it in the mainstream. I just love the courage that they still had to say, we're going to do something here no one has ever done. Standout track, there's so much great music on that double album. I would just simply dive in and say, hidden amongst all of that big stuff, you get George Harrison's Long, 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 which is this really sparse recording. The lyrics are beautiful. It's an ode to God, and it's just such a gentle, quiet track amongst all this big bombastic stuff. It's kind of tucked away. But that album alone, to me, sits in the top 5. Nice. It's an incredible achievement that gets richer as I get older. And because it's part of history, it's easy to overlook these guys for how great they were. But that album's got everything you could possibly want musically, and it's a courageous album for a band that could have afforded to not be courageous and just say, look, we just did Sgt. Pepper. we could probably walk away or rinse and repeat and do kind of the same thing. But they would burn it to the ground and then take a big risk again, which is why we're still talking about them all these years later. What you got?
Next up, I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit, again in time for me, but I jump ahead with a reason, with a purpose.
Yeah.
My mother influenced me by Beatles, Stones, Bowie, and I raised my kids, Beatles, Stones, Bowie, now throwing in Alice Cooper, freaking them out a little bit as kids, throwing in everything I've talked about, and the Pistols, and my son ran with the Pistols, much to my ex-wife's disgust, loved it. But I would play music for them. Chili Peppers, they love it. It's basically the soundtrack of their life. And I remember I would play all different things, Stranglers, etc., etc. Now, for me, the reward for that is specifically my 22-year-old daughter. I'm going back now quite a number of years. She's 22 now. But now coming to me with her music. And that's what I've got my next 2 albums. It's her saying things like, have a listen to this track. It sounds a lot like Ice Queen from the Stranglers. And if you play Ice Queen from the Stranglers, if you want to take notes, go on YouTube, have a listen to that, and then have a listen to Do I Want to Know by the Arctic Monkeys. There is a very similar tone.
Right.
And she would play it for me, go, listen to this. And I went, well, who's this? Arctic Monkeys. Okay. I listened to it. I listened to a couple of other tracks, Arabella and that. That album for me, AM, is one of the coolest albums I've ever heard.
Right.
Brought to me by my daughter. So it's the gift returning to me.
That's great.
I loved it so much. And being a physical guy, I went back and bought the whole back catalogue of everything Arctic Monkeys. I knew of them. I knew a lot of them. Yeah. But I never went, never enough to hook me. My daughter got it through to me, especially with that specific album.
Yeah, right.
I went back and bought every album they had on CD, much to my daughter's why. And again, like records, I like to play it. And quickly bouncing back and forth here, her last birthday, she's getting into vinyl now. Her last birthday, I bought her Dark Side of the Moon.
Perfect.
And she opened it and went, oh my God, the other day I was saying I would love to listen to this again. There it was. She also played for me Australian band. So she played for me a couple of tracks from a band called Sticky Fingers.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, it's not bad. It's okay. Bit reggae-ish. Not bad. And then Gold Snafu came out off the album Land of Pleasure, and that got a bit of radio play, and then was even played, I remember, during the fireworks display one New Year's Eve in Sydney Harbour. And I went, oh, wow, okay, they're starting to pick up on this. Listened to the whole album that she had and went, okay, there's something here. Fell in love with it so much, I've bought everything they've brought out ever since. Went back and bought the whole back catalogue. I know there's been some controversy with the band, very misguided controversy. It's a shame what's happened to them. I won't go down that path now. But brilliant, brilliant Australian band. And if you're not sure, I recommend just going on YouTube and have a looking at the film clip for a song called Australia Street. It's not off that album. It's off Bootleg Rascal, the album Bootleg Rascal, the one before it. The film clip for Australia Street, filmed all in one take.
Yeah, one-shotter.
In Annandale.
Right.
In Sydney. Yeah. Hilarious. The
Really?
more you watch it, the more you'll see their friends in the background doing things. People at restaurants as they're walking past going, what's this? Interrupting them and getting sprayed with beer, and hilarious. But even the lyrics are brilliant, and the song is a fantastic song.
Sticky Fingers.
Sticky Fingers. The joy for that is, it's my mother didn't introduce it to me. My daughter did.
Yeah, that's great.
So that it all connects to me, and that's what music is.
I'll punch out my last two because I know we're running a little bit tight of time, but that's terrific. Sticky Fingers. You put me on to the track "Freaking Out."
Yeah,
that was my gateway into that band. Just a terrific lyric and feel. The last two for me, I'll just throw down real quick. Foo Fighters' "Wasting Light" for me is the best rock album. I'm going to go out and say it's probably for me the best rock album of all time. And there'd be a lot of people that completely disagree with that. But for me, that album, from start to finish, does not miss a beat. And it was recorded in Dave's garage. He wanted to do something completely different and get a unity with the band and get a an analog sound and just record old school and literally be a garage band. But the songwriting on there, I think, is some of his best work, and it's filled with melody but hard edge sound as well. So it's got Rope on there, which I think was the first single. But that's an album you can go back to again and again, and it just gets better and better. Standout track for me is Back and Forth. It's almost pure pop, but because it's wrapped in such a sonic heaviness and edge, it feels like the Foo Fighters. But it's essentially a pop song. That's a great thing about him. He can write pop songs, but then wrap them up, and they can sound more like traditional heavy rock. But underneath there's a great melody writer. So Wasting Light for me stands up as one of the great rock albums of all time.
Without a doubt. Rope to me is just a guitarist's dream.
Yeah.
The way he brings them all together with their own different little riff to make just this vibe. Sorry, I'm just going to go back real quick. I said Australia Street was on an album called Bootleg Rascal. It's not called that. It's called Caress Your Soul. That's just my head.
Good to get that right.
Got to get that right.
Yeah.
Caress Your Soul. Great album.
I'm going to end on this one, then throw to you to bring us home.
Yep.
There's an album called Walls and Bridges by John Lennon, 1974. Now, a lot of people think of Lennon and they'll either cite Imagine or John Lennon Plastic Ono Band as the two great albums from him. And, he didn't have a very extensive solo career because he just wasn't around that long. But 1974, Walls and Bridges, was a reference to the idea of the walls we build in our lives or the bridges we make. So the walls that we put up or the bridges we make to other people. That's essentially the theme. For me, it's the best example of solo Lennon. You get him with Elton John doing Whatever Gets You Through the Night. Number 9, Dream, which is a real Beatley sounding piece of music. He's in good form. He's going through the back end of a breakup with his wife, Yoko, at the time. So he's kind of losing his mind in LA. And he's getting thrown out of clubs and drinking too much and going through this breakdown, essentially. But he brings great art out of that. And it's an album that, for people that aren't really Lennon fans, may not come across. But if you're a Lennon fan, you know that Walls and Bridges is an unsung masterpiece. There's a song on there called Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out. Have a listen to these lyrics. Then I'm lying in the darkness and I know I can't get to sleep. Nobody loves you when you're old and grey. Nobody needs you when you're upside down. Everybody's hollering about their own birthday. Everybody loves you when you're 6 foot in the ground.
Ooh.
This is 1974. By 1980, he's gone, and everybody loves him, and he's 6 foot in the ground.
Yeah.
But that's 1974. Walls and Bridges by John Lennon. It's probably the number one album I go back to again and again, and that's him at the top of his game as a lyricist and as a melody maker. It's a stunning piece of work.
Yep.
And after that, he puts out Rock and Roll, which is essentially an album of covers, and makes no new music for 5 years. So it's an album worth going back to and discovering. What you got?
Sum it up, really, it's just for those of us that love music. If you're listening to this, obviously you're a music lover, but it's the same thing for me. We talked earlier, we mentioned how people play tracks now. They'll jump on Spotify and they'll get their daily mix, whatever. If a song comes to you and you think, wow, then dig. This is what I'm saying, dig. What does that mean? What's it about? Listen to the whole album as one, because most albums do still tell a story. And even if it's the most modern thing you've heard, if it moves you, imagine how much it moved the artists to write it and to make it.
Yeah.
What were they going through when they put their heart and souls out there?
Yeah.
If it's a moving thing and it touches you, no doubt you're connecting somehow with that artist, and that's what music does. Do a bit of digging, do a bit of research, find out more about it, and just keep your passion and love for music going.
Music's a healer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we've had some moments in our time as friends over the years, and I can remember going through the divorce in my first marriage, and I remember I'd come and talk to you, and we'd share stories and insights, and I remember you playing me Nothing Man by Pearl Jam.
Oh.
And I remember you saying to me, I'm going to play you something, but where you're at, it might be too much for you.
Yeah.
But I'm going to play it to you anyway, because I want you to have a listen to these lyrics. I can still remember that.
Yeah.
And again, this idea that, like you just said, what's going on behind the artist's thinking when those lyrics come, if they resonate with you. Because good art is resonating with you because it feels familiar. It's sending you a signal somewhere that this is a truth that you want to find a connection with. Is there no final thought there on another album? Have we gone through the whole thing with you?
Oh, I could keep going.
I know you could.
I've got another disclaimer. I didn't mention one Beatles album because I can't.
Yeah.
It wouldn't matter if you get the first album or let it, everything in between.
Yeah.
To me, I could sit and we could do a whole, as you know as well.
Yeah.
So I didn't do any Rolling Stones either.
No.
But I thought these were the ones during periods of my life, especially periods of change, and I could see the link why it all come back the way it did. Nothing Man, that lyric, caught a bolt of lightning, cursed the day he let it go. I went, oh wow. Caught a bolt of lightning.
Is there anything, just final thoughts, because I guess with this podcast what we want to do is, for if you're still listening, it's going to be music, movies, life, loss, everything in between. And today's just a conversation about some of the music that we'd love you to check out or put your ears around if you're looking to discover sounds old. In terms of sounds new, anything going on now that gets you? Apart from, say, Sticky Fingers, who are still contemporary. But
They're working on an album at the moment. I know the Chili Peppers are still working on another album coming out soon. I just go with the flow. I have a listen.
Your daughter's still giving you stuff?
Now and then.
Son?
Yeah, now and then. Jai does. My son, he's gone down his own path as well. He got right into Sabbath, which I never did.
Yeah.
So he'd be flogging Sabbath, and I'm thinking, where did that come from?
Yeah.
In his room, I'd go in, what are you playing this for? I never got into it, but he found it. And
I got my son doing the same. Harrison, my eldest boy, is playing a lot of Sabbath. I heard Paranoid coming out of his room recently. And I said, what are you doing with that? I love it. This is great. I said, okay. I was never a Sabbath guy, but they're sharing music now and discovering new stuff.
I don't know where it came from because, again, he was getting ready to go out the other night in the bathroom and I could hear him blaring Everybody Wants to Rule the World.
Tears for Fears.
Tears for Fears.
Wow.
And I said, what are you playing that for?
Yeah.
Because it's one of the greatest songs ever. And I went, no. But hey,
for him.
For him it is.
That's a great thing about music.
That's right.
Mate, it's been a really fun episode to sit and go through this little bit of a journey with you on the music that changed us and affected us.
Yes.
We might wrap it up and then get back together and come back in a week or so and do this all again on something completely different.
Completely different.
Talk to you then.
See you soon.